Hey everyone, welcome back. In our last lesson, we took a look at variables, the storage containers our game uses to remember things like numbers, names, and true-false values. Now we're officially starting our main project, asteroids. To kick things off, we're going to learn about functions. Think of a function as a verb to our variables nouns. Variables hold the data, and functions do the things with that data. So let's take a quick look at the learning objectives. We're going to create a blank project. We're going to learn about game modes, and we're going to build a reusable mathematical machine, a function, that calculates a player's score. Alright, so before we start clicking around, let's take a look at three major terms you'll see in this lesson, so you feel confident navigating the engine. We'll start off with level and map. This is essentially your game world. It's the virtual stage where your characters, backgrounds, lasers, and asteroids will live. Then we have an actor. This is an object that can be placed in your world. We've kind of covered this a little bit in the last tutorial. In this particular tutorial, we're going to do a spaceship as an actor, and an asteroid as an actor, and even an invisible background light as an actor. Then we have a game mode. You could think of the game mode as the referee or rule maker of the game. It runs in the background and it tracks the invisible logic that doesn't belong to a single object. For example, the game mode decides like, what is the current score? Is the game over? What map should load next? So let's go ahead and create a new scene. Unreal Engine's default templates start with what you're seeing here, which is a blue sky, clouds, and a floor. Because asteroids takes place in the deep void of space, we want to start with a totally clean slate. So let's go up to the top and go to File, and then let's click on New Level here. We want to select the empty level, which is this option right here, and then go ahead and click Create. And we want to save our new map immediately. So let's head back up to File and go down to Save Current Level As. And I'm going to go ahead and name mine L Asteroids Level, and I'll just leave it in the content for now. Let's go ahead and click the Save button down here. Now that we have our levels set up, let's just take a brief moment and discuss what a function is. I'm a little bit of a foodie, so I like to use food analogies. So imagine you run a smoothie shop, and every time a customer orders, you could manually pull out a knife, chop fruit, measure milk, and stir it up with a spoon and pour it out. That takes a lot of time and leaves room for mistakes. Instead, you buy a blender, you throw your raw ingredients into the top, that's the inputs. You press a button to run a pre-programmed spin cycle, that's the logic, and you pour a finished smoothie out of the bottom, that's the output. In Blueprint scripting, a function is that blender. It is a locked away box of instructions. So instead of rewiring the same math over and over again throughout your game, you build a function once and you can reuse it anywhere by just calling its name. Alright, let's return to Unreal and start to continue to build out our game. Now the first thing we need is the game mode. And if you remember, the game mode is essentially the referee or the rule maker of our game. It answers big questions like what is the player's current score? Is the game over? Did the player win? So let's go ahead and create a referee so that we have a clean slate for our scoring rules. So let's look at the bottom section of our screen and locate the content browser again. Remember, this is our built-in file manager where all of our 3D models, sounds, and scripts live. And let's right-click out into one of these gray areas. And I want to notice here that I am selecting my blueprints folder here. Let's right-click in here and let's go ahead and select the blueprint class here. And what we're looking for is this game mode base here. And as I mentioned before, the game mode base defines the gameplay, the game being played, its rules, scoring, and other facts of the game type. And you can see that it sort of explains it there. Let's go ahead and click on that. I'm going to go and name mine GM underscore asteroids. You probably guessed it. GM stands for game mode rather. Let's go ahead and double click it. I'm going to go ahead and dock this in our scene. Now essentially this window here is your workspace for building all of the logic. So let's go ahead and compile and save this. Alright, let's take a look at creating our first function. In arcade games like Asteroids, players get more points if they destroy targets quickly in a row. So let's build a function that calculates a player's score based on their streak multiplier. Look at the left-hand side of your screen for a panel called My Blueprint. This panel lists all the variables, functions, and components inside this specific file. Find the section header called Function and click the small plus icon next to it. type the name calculate score, and press enter. All right, so if we continue to use our ingredients or our blender essentially reference, what I want to do is I'd like to add the inputs, which are our ingredients. So let's look at the far right side of your screen at the details panel. This panel changes depending on what you've clicked, showing you the exact setting for that item. Find the input section and click the plus button twice. This essentially gives our blender two ingredients to work with. Let's change their names and data types to match this. So for my first input, I named it base points, and I changed its essentially this colored pill here to an integer. And then the second input I named current streak, and I set the same type to an integer as well. So as a refresher, and as we learned in our variables lesson, an integer is simply a whole number with no decimals, like 1 to 42 or negative 500. Unreal color codes integers as a cyan blue, so you can easily spot them on your graph. Let's go ahead and add the outputs, which again essentially is our smoothie. So just below inputs in the detail panel, look for the output section and let's click the button once. Let's name this one final score and just make sure that's also set to integer. Let's compile and save that. Now let's look at the center of our grid on your screen. As a reminder, this is called your graph. And you'll see two boxes which we call nodes, a purple entry node and a return node. Let's connect them with some math. Let's click and hold on our mouse on the round cyan pin off base points, and you can either type in an asterisk or type the word multiply and select your multiply function. We're going to multiply our base points by our current streak, so let's go ahead and connect those. And then I just want to connect this add pin, or sorry, our final return value here to our final score pin here. Finally, if it didn't do this for you already, go ahead and connect the white execution arrow from our calculate score node to our return node. Just a little bit more Unreal terminology. So what exactly is this execution wire? Well, in Unreal, these colored circular pins, they carry data like numbers or text, but the white arrow pins carry time. They're called execution wires, and they tell Unreal that the exact sequence of events. If the white arrows aren't connected, the code will sit there and do absolutely nothing. Let's again click compile and save. And again, a little bit more, and we'll be using a little bit less vocabulary in the future, but just so that we're all on the same page. What compiling is computers don't really read blueprint nodes directly, they read machine code. So clicking compile tells Unreal to translate your visual nodes into computer instructions and to check your graph for any broken wires or sort of math mistakes. All right, so let's make sure our function, or aka our blender, actually works by running it as it starts our level. So up at the top here, locate your event graph tab and click on it. And what we want to do is we want to look for one of these event nodes that say event begin play here. So this is a built-in event node that fires off actions exactly the exact millisecond you press the play button. So from the My Blueprint panel on the left, click and hold your calculate score function, then drag and drop it into the main grid. What you'll notice is it's going to turn into this bright blue. And we have all of our inputs and our output that we created. All right, let's go ahead and connect our white execution arrow from our event begin play into the calculate score node. And then in the empty boxes on our function, let's type in some test numbers. So for example, for base points, like we could start with 100, and then for our current streak, we'd type in 3. Let's compile and save that. I do this often just in case of crashes. All right, and similar to what we've done in previous tutorials, let's go ahead and drag out our execution pin here and just type print. And then let's wire our final score into our in string. Now, just in case you're not familiar with it, a string is just a technical term for text, like a string of characters. And the print string node is a developer's best friend. It prints text or numbers directly onto the screen during playtesting, so you could see if your code is working or not. Notice how Unreal automatically places a small green node between them. That's this guy right here. And it's named essentially toString. It is automatically converting our math integer number into readable text. So let's compile and save this one more time. All right, so we've made our game mode essentially GM Asteroids game mode. and our function, but our empty level doesn't know it's supposed to use them yet. We need to assign or referee to the level. So let's look at the tab at the very top of our screen and click back to your main level by clicking here. And what I want to do is notice that I'm actually recording this past my other one, so I want to go ahead and set up my level or my game mode as my primary level. So first, let's go ahead and locate it. I believe we saved it in our content, which is here. I'm going to double click it. And notice that mine is L_asteroids level for level. And I can go to edit, and then we can go down to project settings here and maps and mode. And just make sure that your editor startup is the L_asteroids level that we created. And the same thing with the game default map for now. And I'm going to go ahead and close that, and I'm just going to hit save all. So now the next time we open our project, it'll automatically load to our asteroids level. Now look on the right side for a panel called World Settings. If you don't see it, you can go to the very top of the menu bar here, click Window, and then you could select World Settings here. Let's go ahead and click on that tab, and you'll notice that there's this Game Mode section, and you want to look for Game Mode Override. Click the drop-down menu that currently says None, and I want to go ahead and select the game mode that we created, so that's this GM Asteroids. Now the level knows to use our custom rules. Let's go ahead and click the play button on our screen, and now you can see that we get our 300. Now you can either click stop or press escape on your keyboard to exit out. So before we move on to lesson 2, let's test your skills. Can you modify your function graph so that it multiplies the points by the streaks, but then adds a bonus of 50 points to the score right before sending it to the final output? So here's a little hit. Go back inside your calculate score function graph, drag out a wire from the multiply node, search for a plus or an add node, and change the math before setting it to your return node. Overall, I hope you enjoyed this lesson and the new format. And yes, please reach out if you need help, and I'll see you in the next lesson.